What in the world is all the hype about having more women in leadership roles? Is there real life data that backs up the claims that it's good for companies and their employees and stakeholders? Or is it just self-serving propaganda for women who want men's jobs? If there is something to it, how does a company go about not just attracting the right women, but keeping them and promoting them into these leadership roles? My aim is to answer these questions and probably a few more. I'm Renee Bengelsdorf, a female entrepreneur in a 99% male-dominated industry. In my day-to-day life, I help some of the world's most interesting people and most successful companies buy or sell their private jets. Yeah, private jets. It's a big job, sometimes kind of daunting, but I have never settled for mediocre. Now I'm here to talk with you about defying the status quo, using my connections, influence, and experience to empower companies, to empower women. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode of Defying the Status Quo. And I am thrilled today to have a guest from across the pond in the UK, Katherine Bennett, who's on the legal team for Airbus. And for those of you who've flown anywhere, you've probably flown in an aircraft that they've manufactured. And Katherine is a dear friend of mine who also sits on the board of the International Aviation Women's Association with me. So we're celebrating that international flavor today, having her on the podcast. And Katherine, I am thrilled to have you here and cannot wait to talk not just about diversity at Airbus and how well Airbus is doing in this arena, but I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the UK with a charter that you've put together. So why don't you tell the guests a little bit, or our listeners a little bit about what you do for Airbus and how long you've been working there?
Well, thank you, Renee, and it's great to be part of your podcast. I had a quick peek at it earlier today, and I know all the work you do, so thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to know you. And so, I'm based in the UK. I work for Airbus, and I head up the public affairs function for them, based most of the time in London. I actually live 2 hours out of London, and I'm in my country home at the moment, which is in a part of the UK called Wiltshire. So it's nice to be able to link in digitally with my Iowa friends and all the other people who subscribe to your podcast, Renee. To Airbus for 14 years, through various roles, but mainly on the external relations side, working here in the UK and in London and in Bristol, our other sites around the UK. But also, I spent 2.5 years, Renee, working for our HQ in Toulouse in South France. So I've had the joys of working in another European country as well. But now I'm mainly based here. I travel a lot. I have to go visit the other European capital cities, Brussels particularly at the moment. And, I enjoy being part of an international company.
That's great. Now, Airbus has been a great sponsor of Iowa over the years, and I know that we earlier this year did an event in Singapore where we put together a video of Airbus's reception that they did for Iowa, and your CEO came and spoke about the importance of having women on his team, and especially very involved in all different aspects of the company. And can you talk a little bit about what that means to you personally, having such a champion in the leadership role of the company?
Of course. I mean, all of these things, as I'm sure we'll all agree, is a journey. And Airbus is still on a bit of a journey. But you're absolutely right, it's important that our CEO and other senior leaders on our executive team really focus on diversity and actually also inclusion as well. We talk about that a lot. And yes, maybe it has been one of the real highlights on our journey because, yes, we had a focus at the Singapore Air Show where we had over 60 ladies and join, and yes, Tom Enders, our CEO, came and spoke at that event. It was a little bit impromptu, but he came in and was happy to be with us, and that really, we're very keen on, you know, empowering and encouraging women in the Asia Pacific region too. In terms of the rest of our journey, on the other highlight for us in 2018 was the fact that Grazia Vittadini was appointed CTO of Airbus. So she's now on the main board and is our first woman on the main board, which maybe this is why I say it's a bit of a journey, a bit more work to do. She's a highly qualified engineer, very impressive. And actually a number of colleagues of ours from Iowa have met her because she spoke in Dubai, and very passionate and really encourages more and more women to get into aerospace and aviation.
So let's bring it back to the UK for a moment. Tell me about this breakfast that you organized with the Minister of Aviation earlier this year. And this is a woman as well. Yeah.
So let me tell you a bit of a story. So in May this year, through Iowa and Kennedy's law firm in the City of London, we arranged a breakfast. And yes, the aviation minister at the moment in the UK is a Baronet, Liz Sugg, and she happens to be quite a good personal friend of mine. And she came along, and we were honestly, we were astounded with the number of people that came, about 80 people there. It was a beautiful venue overlooking the city, and definitely worth getting up early for. And an idea emerged, and the idea came from another dear friend of mine, Mary McLeod from Corn Ferry, to have a chat in the promote aviation and aerospace and women in that sector. In a way, it was copying something that had already happened. It was a women in finance. So Mary had been quite involved in that. And she said, why don't you do one for your sector? And I tell you, Renee, it started huge, like fast moving movement. So that was May. And we thought, yeah, let's do this. Let's just get on with it. And the minister was very supportive. And I'm absolutely thrilled. We were in such a good position that in July this year at the Farnborough Air Show, we were able to announce the charter. And might not be able to see it so easily on the screen. And the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who is, of course, another lady, she actually announced it with us. So it was absolutely astounding. But I tell you what, for example, I contacted British Airways. They replied within 3 minutes on the email I sent them. The response, there wasn't even a door for me to push. It was wide open already. And we had our first big seminar this week to move it onwards. And it's already had a lot of interest from a lot of people in other parts of Europe where it leads to. But it's a serious thing. It's not just a nice bit of paper. It's a serious commitment that companies have signed up to. Airports, aerospace, general aviation, you'd be pleased to hear, Renee, and a lot of other organisations. And that we're all very keen to move it forward.
So tell me, really, what does this Charter of Women in Aviation and Aerospace, what's it going to mean for the industry, and what's it going to mean for women, Katherine?
Yeah, so as I said, it's not a bit of paper. And there was a little bit of done, I'm sure other people will have experienced things like this, where you had to slightly tweak the wording so you'd get everyone to sign up. And there's this question about targets and etc. But the main thing is it's a commitment to increase the number of women in our industry, to have some kind of analysis. The analysis you don't have to necessarily share in public, but we are sharing the data that we are all compiling. Second step will be, and it's been incredible, our seminar on Monday, this lady from an airport near to where I live, who I know quite well, she said, well, actually, what about that idea? Another company, Thales, were talking about maybe they could share their training they do on unconscious bias. We thought we could share how that's done. And actually, it's had another lovely effect because some other sectors are now looking at doing charters as well. So the maritime sector on the charter too, the pharmaceuticals, the law sector, the legal sector, and I'm now working hard on getting one for women defence as well. So, you know, the world's our oyster at the moment.
I think that's absolutely brilliant. And thank you for the work that you're doing. I know that you're spearheading a lot of this work, although you're looking for other women to come alongside of you so that you can share the burden and the credit, because I know how humble you are, and this is a team effort for you. And I know you're very encouraging for other women to come alongside of you. And it's one of the things that makes you such a great leader and board member in our organization. So I think this is really interesting, but it feels to me like it follows some other things that have been going on in the UK. And I read about this, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, that Prime Minister May had some sort of an initiative, either the end of last year or early this year, that companies over 250 people had to publish what they paid people in certain positions, and where there was not pay parity, it was kind of made public that those companies were not treating female employees the same as male employees. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe the tone that set in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, the Prime Minister, as I'm sure we'll all be aware, has a huge burden on her shoulders at the moment. And let's not talk about that main topic at the moment.
No.
But, you know, what's incredible is that she's also managed to push through. She's absolutely passionate about, and all other diversity requirements. But she, yes, has spearheaded this piece of legislation, which is called the gender pay gap. And yes, all companies over a certain size have to report. And I tell you, Renee, it was not the easiest thing for some companies to have to do. The media had it, I think, as a Google alert when every company put their report online, and they were all looking to see how people stacked up. And for many companies, it's not very easy reading. And probably that's one of the reasons why the charter idea did actually get such a quick response, because it really, what I would say, put on this area. And there's other countries that have similar legislation. But yes, and also it had to be explained a bit. It's not that easy to understand about how the measurement was done, and you know, we'll see where this leads to. But it certainly does show that sometimes government legislation can help frame change, which I'm fascinated with as somebody in the political arena.
Well, it definitely sparked some conversations and some interest, not just in the UK, but around the world. And I think that it's a good thing to talk about these things. I think it's a great thing to have open and productive conversations. And I applaud you with the charter for doing just that. So I want to get personal here just for a second. We've been talking about high and lofty ideas. What brought you into aviation? I want to know.
Yeah, so I majored in politics and history at university, and always liked to communicate. I'm a very people person. I love to write, and I love sort of dealing with extras. So I started in a public relations company, Hill and Knowlton, and started at the very bottom doing the photocopying, and then basically managed to get opportunity on different accounts. And one of the clients I had was General Motors. So I got to know them very well. And then they made me an offer to move to work for them in-house. So in the UK, they're called Vauxhall. So I went there for 8.5 years and started leading their function. Went through quite a lot of highs and lows in terms of things I was dealing with, but always, you know, had full admiration for engineers, people who with you know, business strategy, etc. So it really, you know, being in a big company, it really opened my eyes, and I got huge awareness. And then Airbus came and knocked on my door and offered me a position there. So I've been lucky. I've been able to move into career changes, maybe sometimes, or people have approached me. And yes, I've been 14 years, been quite a long time, but I've seen the company go quite a lot of, change is a good thing. And I'm also dealing not only with civil aviation now, but also some on the defence side too, and the space industry, which is a whole new sector for me. So that's my background. And of course, at the same time, keeping an eye on political activity in terms of government's work. So I've seen lots of different administrations in my career and how they respond to business.
Well, I will say, this podcast is really about helping companies learn how to empower women. And I will say that one thing that I've noticed about Airbus, and it's not just you, it's other women who've been involved as well, is that they really give you a long leash, if you will. And I want to use that in a positive sense, not a negative sense. They give you a lot of runway to push forward initiatives that are beneficial to women in the industry. And one of the things that, we've mentioned several things that Airbus and you personally have been involved with, but tell me a little bit about what you're doing in Paris in November after our Iowa conference in Memphis in October.
Yeah, well, I like to observe and see things that work well. And I heard a lot, Renee, about the General Aviation Forum you arranged, which I know was terribly successful. And of course, then there was the one Southern America, Latin Americas, which again was a great success. And I thought, I have responsibility for Europe and Asia. Let's see what we can. And yes, so quite quickly again, maybe that's a bit of a pattern for me. I come up with an idea and then things suddenly happen. On the 19th of November, who's interested, we have a European Iowa Forum at the Aviation Club in the center of Paris, which is a beautiful venue. And one of my colleagues, Anne Pascal Guidon, is arranging this. She's got lots and lots of contacts in the Paris networks, and we're working hard to pull it together. But it's obviously not just about France. We're hoping to get senior officials and politicians from Brussels and from other part and from Spain, and maybe I might get one or two from the UK. But we're delighted with how it's moving. So yes, it'd be wonderful to come along to that, and we're getting some good speakers.
I think it's amazing. I think that where we're really going to see change in our industry is in all of these types of grassroots efforts that people like you and other people around the world are putting together. So if you could tell a company CEO 3 things that you should let women in your organization do to really improve the working environment for women or improve the overall industry for women, what would be your 3 things you would suggest?
My theory on this, and this is very much my personal opinion, is that, and stereotypical, but you kind of have to when you have this debate, is women do like to observe how other women have done things. They are inspired by them, which is a word I know we use a lot. And I would say to the CEO, he or she, women who are doing well and are in high profile roles, should be empowered. As you say, maybe have a long leash, allow them to go out, communicate what they're doing, give them a bit of a profile. And that will encourage other women, I believe, to come through and be encouraged by that. And I certainly think that's something our gender tends to do. Secondly, and this is from very recent personal experience, it's fantastic that women in top leadership positions say, oh, we need more women on this project, or we need more women in this team. That's great. And in point of saying it, oh, look, can't you, how proud I am. I've got 3 extra women on this team. That's great. But make sure you practice. So don't, I suppose the thing is, don't just do lip service. we're all intellectual human beings, and we can see fake. So don't just say I've got 3 people on my committee or team. You need to sort of, they need to have proper roles. So that's very, very important. And finally, maybe this is more an observation than a final tip, Renee, but in the next generation, I sincerely do. Working on this charter, I've got 3 young other colleagues, a couple from my company, but others from other aerospace companies, who are absolutely passionate about the charter. And they're sort of email, taking photos. And I think for them, it's just part of life, having women around them. And I don't know, they sometimes, a missing. And I think maybe that's just my third observation, is that allow the younger generation to demonstrate that for them it's just not, they don't even it, it's just everyday life. Whereas maybe for the older generation, it still is something we have to fight for. And I have great faith and confidence that through.
I think that's great. I think it's fantastic. Katherine, thank you so much for being on today. I've learned so much from you over the years, and I am always encouraged by your enthusiasm. And man, you epitomize just going out and doing it. You don't debate about it for a long time, even though you work in a very large company. You aren't thinking about, oh, well, maybe I could do this or maybe I could do that. You just make it happen. And I think that that's inspirational. And I think that's the biggest thing that I take away from you. So everyone, thank you so much for participating in the Defying the Status Quo podcast today, where we help women empower companies. We've heard from Katherine Bennett today, who is on the International Aviation Women's Association board with me, and she is an absolute ambassador for her company, Airbus, in everything that she does. Thanks so much for being here.